Diagweave go léir cóide agus tá fáilte rót. Welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation, and Deal Animal Rescue in West Limerick. Now, I'm truly honoured today that my guest is Deborah Ann Wilcox, Baroness Wilcox of Newport, who is a Welsh Labour councillor and former teacher, who has served from May 2016 until September 2019 as leader of Newport City Council. She's also head of the Welsh Local Government Association, a role she's held since 2017. In September 2019, it was announced that she would be made a Labour Life Peer in the 2019 Prime Minister's resignation honours and would be stepping down as council lead. She was born in the Rhondda Valley and brought up in Porthwaite. She studied for a Bachelor of Education in Drama and Education at the Central School of Speech and Drama between 1975 and 79, followed by an MA in Media Studies at the University of Wales, Cardiff, between 1994 and 1997. Hello, Baroness. Welcome to Be My Guest.
Hello, Mary. Thank you very much for that introduction. Please call me Debbie.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so complicated, wondering whether I should call you Baroness or Lady. Yes. Lady yes. Wilcox. But firstly, before we start, on behalf of Lear Media, we'd like to extend our sympathy to you and the Labour Party on the death of Joan Davies. May she rest in peace, who was a profoundly significant person to the Labour Party and to you as a fundraiser.
Yes, indeed she was. And I only heard the news this morning, and I spoke to her son earlier today. And Joan was of that generation where community was all. She ran our community centre. She ran the weekly bingo session. She was a prolific baker and could easily have been on Bake Off. And just an all-round solid and indefatigable member of our community. Over the years, she raised tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds for charity, all local charities. And it's been an extremely upsetting day today to hear that part of that generation is past, because to get people to volunteer these days is very difficult. But people like Joan were just wonderful, and communities rested on them.
And you know, she died on New Year's Eve.
Yes.
Or New Year's Day, wasn't it? Was it New Year's Day or New Year's Eve?
She passed away on New Year's Eve, but I found out about it this morning from my colleague who's a ward councillor with me, because she'd moved out of the area to live with her son, and we'd only just found out. So it's a sad day today, but you know, we'll honour her memory, and she wouldn't want any fuss. I can tell you that now, Mary. She'd be the last person to have any fuss, but she deserved it.
Isn't it amazing that people like that, you know, become so much part of your extended family, really? I mean, you probably didn't know her before you went down the route of politics, and yet she was so intrinsically linked to your campaign and to I suppose Welsh society. Really, she was a real Welsh woman.
Yeah, she was. She was a fantastic example of being a volunteer and being a community person. She really was the best. So, you know, her funeral will be at the end of the month, and I will take time from Westminster to attend and to say a few words on behalf of us all. And thank you very much for your condolences, which I will pass on.
Thank you indeed. Thank you indeed. Deborah, or Debbie, we have quite a few things in common, not least the fact that we both, I did the Victoria College of Music, Speech and Drama, and you did your speech and drama also with the Central School of Speech.
Yes.
How important do you think that was in helping you to, I suppose, fake it till you make it? Because you're bound to be nervous when you're making a speech, and how is it going to go down with an audience? But the fact that you've had I suppose the drama background, it helps you to cover up a lot of your nerves when you're making that important speech.
Yes, yes. And it is covering up nerves, Mary. People who know me and people who know me very well see me as a very outgoing and confident person. And of course I am, but that's learned behavior. It's taken a long time. I remember very clearly arriving in London in September 75, as an 18-year-old from the valleys, and everyone seemed so posh and so confident, and everyone spoke in this, lovely RP English. And I just thought, oh gosh, I know nothing. But do you know what? Once I got through that facade of accents and dialects, I realized that actually I was as clever as or cleverer than a lot of them. But it's that confidence factor that a lot of people get from that system. But, once you break that down, and I think that's what's important about representation. So someone like me in the House of Lords should represent to others that it is that public life is a possible route for everyone, and there should be no barriers to people taking part in public life. And we need to see ourselves, and I think that's why we have perhaps underrepresentation of women or marginalized groups in politics, because people don't see themselves there. Okay, yeah. See yourself at the table, you can be at the table, and that's always been my métier. But certainly that confidence I gained at Central, and then throughout a 34-year teaching career, has held me in the most wonderful stead of being able to deal with not every problem or situation, but experience counts. So that confidence grew from that experience.
And you did start off as a teacher, and you were many years as a teacher. And I was just, I'm just thinking of the children nowadays that are going into classes, and their classes have been, and their education has been so stunted. It's just, to me, it feels almost immoral. There's a group of children. There's, if you like, a generation of children whose education, whose emotional well-being is stunted because they have not gone to school at 4 years of age or 5 years of age or whatever. They're being told to go to school, wear a mask, leave windows open, and when in actual fact the facilities should be there for them, that they don't have to do that. There should be proper ventilation in the schools. That one would think with third or first world countries that we could provide those facilities for children. And I was looking at actually one of on your Twitter page, and a Twitter page, and people have actually brought that subject up, that that in this day and age, that the facilities should be there, and the government should provide, any government of any first world country should provide the facilities for children to go to school and be warm and be safe, and not have to be victims, I suppose, of situations that are beyond their control. I mean, there's children now that haven't been in school, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds who haven't properly been in school a day in their life, in their, since in their school life. How does that feel to you, Debbie, from a teacher's point of view?
I was able to have quite a good catch up over the Christmas and New Year period with friends, former colleagues, because I like to gain my knowledge firsthand, so from experience. So I always want to hear from people who are actually doing those jobs and doing those tasks. And the experiences of staff are extremely difficult at the moment.
Yeah.
The Education Secretary of the UK government spoke this morning about 8,000 ventilators being put in secondary schools. Well, there are 100,000 schools in the country. 8,000 is a drop in the ocean. And Facilities. I mean, obviously, the last time I was in a classroom full time was 2016, when I did some supply work to help out in my former school. But you know, schools have always been so badly served, except here in Wales, we have our own Welsh government, and one of the proudest parts of the last 20 years of devolution has been our 21st Century Schools programme here in Wales, where we have literally rebuilt our school stock. And you know, we've done so in Newport, where we have several new high schools, many new primary schools, where we've rebuilt and we've made those classrooms fit for purpose. Of course, the problem with ventilation and the issues is the backlog of repairs, because the first thing the Tory government did in 2010 was close down their schools building programme. And so those schools have not been replenished and rebuilt. They are not fit for purpose. And young people are having to sit there with windows open in these terrible temperatures of January. We endorsed, in my party, the Labour Party, we endorsed months ago, looking at the problem, because you see, the issue of governance, whether you're running a city council as I did, or whether you're running a faculty in a school as I did, you have to be strategic and you have to plan ahead.
Yeah.
What we've seen from this Tory government is lack of strategy, lack of planning, and this crisis management after crisis management. So young people are suffering. I don't think we'll see the full extent of some of the emotional and psychological issues that will happen to these young people who have been out of school. Because another thing that schools do, Mary, is they're a catch-all for issues and problems, and they deal with children and young people's emotional growth, and being outside of that school environment has had a tremendous knock-on effect to that emotional growth. And we will see those problems coming out for several years hence, because we head off the trouble at the pass in schools often. Very often we are the first point of contact where we deal with those matters.
That's what I was going to say to you. I looked at a post on your Twitter from Stephen Morgan MP, who was saying, you know, that now 2 years down the line, thousands of schools are expected to open up their windows as the temperatures, as he described, as the temperatures plummet and the prices of oil and heating rise. But, you know, I was thinking, teachers are being asked to, and it's the same here in this country, teachers are asking pupils to bring thermals with them to school. And I'm thinking, there's children going to school and thermals are the least of their problems. They haven't, they're here in this country, there are children living in hotels, in a temporary hotel accommodation. They have to stay out until 9 o'clock at night. They don't have the facility of a computer. They're probably, some children, many children are the victims of abuse. There's been very high profile cases in the UK recently of children who have slipped between the net because probably a teacher would have recognized that they were missing from school or that there was something going on with them, but because they're not able to go to school, they're slipping between the net. And there's in my view, it's just a personal view, there's far more severe things than COVID in people's minds when there's a child slipping between the net and abused to the point of death because nobody can see them. Their teacher, who might be the only person they'll go to, is not available to them, and they haven't got, God knows, they haven't got the facilities. They haven't got a computer. They haven't got a room. They haven't got books. You know, we're living in we're a first world country, and both our countries thinking of everybody in it as being first world citizens, and they're not.
No, indeed. You know, and all those issues you raise are entirely correct. What I would say, and it's this unique experience that I have now of dealing very closely with the Welsh government, because when I was the leader of the WLGA, I was the most senior councillor in Wales. So I dealt very closely with the First Minister and with the ministers of the Welsh government. And my party runs Wales, the Labour Party, and now I'm in the opposition party in Westminster, in the House of Lords, where we're the shadow group, the Labour group. And so I see it from both sides of the fence. And what I see is in my country, where Labour runs Wales, we still have a much closer engagement and contact, and we bring our socialist values to the fore so that we are able to, where we can, put resources into those areas that need putting into. But here's the rub, Mary, and I raise it constantly. The purse strings are held in Westminster.
Yes.
So however much, as in Northern Ireland and as in Scotland, however much the different governments want to do, they still have to dance to the paymaster's tune, and that paymaster is the Tory government in the UK. So we can move things around, and we can prioritise, and we can do what we can, but only with fair funding. And that's another issue as well, of course.
Well, before we earlier on today when we were speaking, I was saying to you, I'm the granddaughter of a woman from Pontypridd, and I spent a lot of my childhood in Porthcawl in Wales. My uncle still lives in Wales. He moved back there with my aunt because she came from there and she wanted to be buried there. That's the way she wanted it. She was from Tunapandy. But and my grandmother was a Welsh supporter all her life to the day she died, and considered the Labour Party, I suppose, to be very much, as you said, a socialist agenda where everyone was treated equally. And that's what I mean by socialism. And a workers' party, if you like. How do you think that it's starting to look in the 21st century? When I suppose you have Tony Blair being given a knighthood. And I mean, yesterday on the 8th, I was looking at a newspaper article in The Independent on the 8th, an article with Emily Atkinson and Adam Forrest, and they said that over 1 million people had actually voted had signed a petition to have him his knighthood removed from him for his involvement. Now, granted, he was very instrumental in the peace accord here in Ireland, and for that we're hugely grateful. But it can't be overlooked, his involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the Afghanis and Iranians and the British soldiers that all died because of misinformation, if you like. I hate that phrase, but that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. How does it feel as a Labour, as somebody who's for the people and to being part of a party that is supposed to be for the average, everyday working class person, that Tony Blair has been given this knighthood? Do you think he should have been given it? Do you think he should take it back or give it back?
I'll answer that, but let me just reiterate. You said about working people. Well, we had an election in May 2021 in Wales, and resoundingly Welsh Labour won again. That's 20 years we've been running Wales. So in terms of workers and working class people, if you could make these distinctions, Welsh Labour continues to carry out as best as it can to run the country for the people of Wales. And during the pandemic, I must pay particular tribute to Mark Drakeford, the First Minister, who takes no prisoners and listens to the scientific advice and follows the scientific advice, which is why Wales has got different restrictions. That's why we're in level 2, and that's why working from home is still very much on the cards. In terms of Tony Blair, I didn't ever work under him because although just in my very early years as a councillor, but I welcome the knighthood of Tony Blair. He deserves the honour. He's many achievements in government, and he vastly improved the UK. He won 3 elections. He was a very successful Prime Minister. Obviously, I can't list all his achievements. But if you think of the minimum wage, you think of Sure Start for young families. But I would pick out the work that he did in Northern Ireland and the peace process and the huge change it made. You see, I saw the profound impact it had on peace on both communities through my dealings with the NILGA, which is the Association for Local Government in Northern Ireland, when I was leader of the Welsh LGA. So I think he deserves the honour. But obviously, I respect the fact that people have different views. And in terms of the million signatures, I think some of the most pernicious aspects of our modern world is social media, or anti-social media, as I like to call it. And I think you can click in a minute without thinking about what you're doing. So, you know, as I said, I respect the fact that people have different views, but I'm not sure that, each and every one of those million people knew what they were clicking for.
Do you not think so? I think when people think, you see, people who are associated here in Ireland or know of Tony Blair's work here in Ireland are obviously hugely aware of the involvement he had in Mo Mowlam, who I think was just an extraordinary woman. I just think Mo Mowlam will never in this lifetime, I don't think, get the honours she deserved for her contribution here in Ireland. She was a remarkable woman in every way.
Can I just cut across you there and say that the honour I have of working in the Labour team in the Lords is that I work with a great deal of people who are former ministers in Tony Blair and Gordon Brown's government, and knew Mo Mowlam personally and worked with her. No one more so than my leader, the shadow leader of the House, Baroness Angela Smith, who was a Northern Ireland minister, and speaks, well, as everyone does, speaks very highly of the time they spent in Ireland and obviously the time with Mo Mowlam.
Yeah, she was an amazing woman, and Tony Blair, as I say, was instrumental in all of that. But I just think that it is going to be forever overshadowed by what happened in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And there are going to be. It's a shame. It's a shame, but it's overshadowed his knighthood, I think. How did you get involved in politics? Because you were so involved in teaching. It seems a big. Obviously, you had a very social conscience.
Indeed. Well, I can trace things back. Obviously, I was involved in student politics.
Sorry for interrupting. Why Labour?
Oh, right. Okay. So obviously I was involved in student politics. And then when I came back from London to teach in Wales, my stepfather, Terry, was a coal miner, and it was the 84-85 miners' strike. And that's really when I became really politicised. I was part of the Māori Women's Support Group and raising funds for, that year-long strike, which decimated our communities in South Wales. And, many would say we've never really recovered from that post-industrialisation. So during the 80s, I was involved in that. And then during the 90s, although I was building my career, it came towards, and again, Tony Blair winning in 97 was a tremendous moment, because until that time, I'd only ever, as an adult, known a Tory government. And, Mrs. Thatcher did her very best to make sure that no one could look at anything other than the Labour Party if you had any kind of social conscience. I was working in public service. So after 97, I thought, I'm really going to start making a bit of an effort. So I rejoined the Labour Party. I got involved in my local branches and with the GC in Newport. And it came up to the 2004 local elections, and I'd done all sorts of roles, like, the secretary of the branch and whatever. And someone said to me, well, why don't you stand as a councillor? And I didn't think of it. But I did think of it then, and thought I wouldn't be able to combine it with both my day job. But in fact, there were ways and means where I could. So I stood for election in the Gare and Mays Glass ward in Newport in 2004. And I will have the honour this May now of standing down after 18 years, undefeated. And not all of my colleagues in the House of Lords can say they've been undefeated in an election, but I can. So from 2004 to 2012, I did backbench work. I learned my trade. I worked with people like Joan in the community. I combined both aspects of the day job and the Labour Party stuff. And then in 2012, when we won that was my third election. The leader at the time, Councillor Bright, put me in his cabinet. And then in 2014, I had the opportunity of taking early leave of teaching when I became the Cabinet Member for Education and Lifelong Learning. And then 2016, I became the first woman leader of Newport. So it was a gradual thing, but it was hard work combining both aspects. But, you know, give a busy person a job and they'll do it. I just thoroughly enjoyed both that. I wasn't ready to give up teaching straight away. I still had time in me. And in fact, ironically, I went back after leaving teaching for 2 years. I went back for 4 months, as I said, to help out in 2016. But that really is the last time I've been in the classroom. But my sense of public service as a teacher, combined with my public duty as a councillor, it worked very well together. And I'm good at helping people. I'm good at thinking on my feet. I'm good at speaking, and I'm good at strategy. And all those things just worked.
Can I ask you, Debbie, how important you think lifelong learning is? Because I'm a huge advocate. My brain sparked up once you mentioned lifelong learning. I think, you know, people tend to think, oh, you know, once they've left school, that's it. This is my job for the rest of my life. And I'm a huge believer in advancing yourself, and then you going through life and life takes you in different directions. But you follow your instinct, and your gut instinct will always put you in the right direction for you at that particular moment. But education's never wasted. It mightn't be. I did a degree in art and design, and then I went down the route of English literature and studied Holocaust. My research was on childhood under Nazism and the literature associated with it, either written from firsthand or fictional or memoirs. But how important do you think it is for people to actually, and to be given that opportunity to get back on the education and to improve themselves and to maybe take a different route that they never thought that they were going to take in their lives?
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. I mean, I'm a real advocate of lifelong learning, and I've been very involved in the promotion of skills and the skills agenda, both in local government in South Wales, and I'm part of the education team on the front bench. So we've been working on the skills bill in the House of Lords, and I've had recent meetings with people in the Open University, both in Wales and in England. And, you know, that's that was invented by Harold Wilson in the 60s in the Labour government. And it's that kind of, but it's not just the Open University, it's all other kind of branches of apprenticeships and any kind of learning that you can improve, or just the self-improvement. So huge advocate for that, always promoting it. And, you know, we never stop learning.
Do you think that there's too much emphasis being placed on the importance of a third level education, and not every child is going to be academic, but they might be a carpenter, or they might be a mechanic, or do you think that it would be important maybe to make these trades into degrees, if you like? So you have a degree in mechanics, or you have a degree. That way people psychologically who want to have a degree but never might fall through the cracks once they actually get into college, or might not get into college, but at least they can say that they have a BA, or they have a bachelor's degree, if you like, in mechanics, or in electronics, or in as an electrician. How important do you think that is for people?
I think there's an opportunity for all within that. But what we've been arguing in the skills bill is that learning shouldn't be cut off below level 3. And particularly with BTEC qualifications, we've got into several arguments with the government over that, because you don't want to limit opportunities. So, for example, some youngsters may use the BTEC qualifications as entry into university, whereas others take the traditional route of A levels. Now, we're not against the new T levels that are coming in, not against them at all, but there needs to be enough room in the space for a mixed economy so that the best form of education can be given to the youngsters who need different types. Because what I saw in my very long career was that it's not one size fits all.
No. No, I'm very cognizant of that. I think children are being pigeonholed, and you're being told you do your A levels, or here in Ireland, it's your leaving certificate. And once you do that, you're almost expected to go on and to a third level degree. Many children will. I encourage people, anyway, that especially if they want medicine or that, you've got to have something like 9 A1s in this country to get medicine. I usually encourage people, if you really want medicine, go where you don't have to have those, or take a year out, or wait until you're 23 and go back as a mature student, have your fees paid for, and you don't have to have the 9 A1s to do it. If that's what you really want, do something different until you're 23, maybe do physiotherapy or some other course or science that leads you into it. Students get so frantic thinking, I have got to get 9 A1s because I have to do a degree and I have to do medicine at 18 years of age. And they don't.
No, indeed. So I'm a real advocate for variety and for people returning to education as well.
Well, that's the way I did it. I went back as a mature student, did my master's, PhD, as a degree as well as a mature student. So yes, I just think it's so important. Life doesn't end when you're 18 and you don't start your career path. But you were saying there earlier now that you were very proud that Labour has been in power in Wales for many, many years and not been beaten. And that's fantastic. But you suffered an incredible defeat in the last elections. And how much of that defeat do you think was down to the anti-Semitism that was reported to be in the party under Jeremy Corbyn? And I mean, it was the first, it has to be said, Labour was the first party to be investigated by the Equality and Human Rights Commission.
Which was set up by a Labour government.
Absolutely. I know that. A human rights watchdog that found that Labour was responsible for all unlawful acts of harassment and discrimination. And Jeremy Corbyn denied all of it. And how much do you think that he was that he contributed to the downfall of the Labour vote? Because many long-time Labour supporters who I heard them being interviewed, and their whole families had been Labour all their lives, and they said, my grandparents will turn in my grave, but I can't vote for them. How much of it do you think was down to Jeremy Corbyn and his and the perceived and the anti-Semitism within the party?
It's absolutely unequivocal that we lost, and we lost badly. It was the worst result we'd had since the 1930s. And, in North Wales, we lost seats that we hadn't lost before or for a very long time. While I won't be drawn on an individual who was the former leader of the party, but what I will say quite clearly to you is that Labour is an anti-racist party, and anti-Semitism is racism.
Yes.
It's unacceptable in our party and in wider society. And our party's National Executive Committee has endorsed the IHRA definition, and that IHRA definition captures the idea of hostile conduct towards individuals and institutions on the ground that they are Jewish. And the Labour Party Code of Conduct has a rule on anti-Semitism. And it's, unfortunately, anti-Semitism, again, has been spread by that scourge of social media. There are many anti-Semitic conspiracy theories circulating. These are used to insult, to belittle, to blame, and demonize Jewish people for many different things within our society. None of this is acceptable. And none of it will be tolerated from Labour Party members. It does not align with our aims and values. And we as a party have made a commitment to require that all members who are respondents in any upheld complaints of anti-Semitism will take appropriate educational training modules or indeed be expelled from the party. It's as clear as, there is zero tolerance.
But I think it was his refusal, and I know you don't want to be drawn on any member of the party, but his refusal to adopt the international terminology or the definition of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's now been fully accepted by our new leader. And, Mr. Corbyn is not a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party. He sits as an independent. I think that sends you the message, Mary.
How important do you think Keir Starmer is to the party now? And how do you think he has he brought the party in a good direction, do you think? And is it, given that I know I'm asking you all these questions, but given that, had it not been, I was shocked myself, but had it not been for the Labour Party, there were 99 Conservatives, backbenchers, voted against Boris Johnson's attempts to bring in the vaccine pass for nightclubs and venues over 500 people. It would have failed, but it was the biggest loss for a leader of the Conservatives ever, and it would never have got through had Labour not voted and helped it to get over the line. How did that go with the Labour Party?
Okay, at the time, the leader said, "The Labour Party that I lead will always act in Britain's best interests." So what Labour has urged people to do with the COVID restrictions is do the right thing, despite the poor example set by Boris Johnson. Wes Streeting, who's our new health secretary, said in Parliament that the government had undermined people's trust at a critical moment with these denials and non-denials around Christmas parties that clearly did take place. And in the address that Keir Starmer made in response to Mr. Johnson's televised address, he said that it was important that we get Britain boosted. And he also said that it is his solemn duty to challenge the government where necessary. The public must preserve and protect the NHS. But obviously our health service need the equipment and staff to be able to protect us. Now, waiting lists are a key health issue for the government. And I'll just reiterate why the opposition, why the Labour Party provided the votes needed for the rules to pass. Keir Starmer talked about us being a patriotic party. It's our patriotic duty to ensure for the measures that they go through. And again, he said he will always lead in Britain's best interests. So that's why those votes went through.
I found it interesting at the time. I thought, oh my God, the Labour Party has been traditionally, I suppose, opposition to the Conservatives or to the government, and except when they were in government themselves. And I just thought it was ironic that it took a Labour Party to get it over the line when 99 of its own Conservatives had rejected it. But at this time, Mary, at this time we need leadership. All right, during this pandemic, it's not going anywhere. And we need leadership that the country can trust. And I don't trust Boris Johnson or his ministers. I trust Keir Starmer
and his judgment. And I can't say I work closely with him, but I'm part of the wider front bench team. I have regular meetings with him. I see him behind the scenes and off the record, and he is a man I would put my complete trust in. I can't say the same for Boris Johnson.
Well, it's good to hear that it's under a leader that you feel that you have complete and utter trust in, and somebody who's bringing the party, you feel, in the right direction.
Absolutely.
You were shortlisted by Pride Cymru in Wales online pink list, which recognises the most influential LGBTQ or plus people in Wales. And you were an advocate for the repeal of Section 28, a statute forbidding the promotion of homosexuality by local government-maintained schools. And that statute was repealed in September 2003 by the Local Government Act of 2003. Congratulations on that. How important is that to you, Debbie?
I mean, it's extremely important to be a role model within the LGBT community. It's how I've lived my life. It's not anything that I've particularly taken much notice of, but obviously people have taken notice of what I've said and what I've done and what I do by, just by being open and straightforward and not hiding. I had to hide during the 80s, and the Section 28 aspect of, being a school teacher and having your very livelihood threatened by an unrepentant Tory party and these extremely harsh laws that were then repealed by Tony Blair's Labour government. Was a very very difficult time. So you only understand sometimes you've been through the war when you look back and see the battles that you've won. So I'm extremely honoured that the LGBT plus community have recognised me in this way. It's not something that I've ever sought, but I've never shied away from standing up for what I believe is right and standing up for people. I'm incredibly lucky. I have a partner of over 33 years, Fabi, and she has been extremely supportive during the good times and the bad. So that's something to be proud of and something that we cherish. And I'm a great fan of Strictly Come Dancing. And
so am I. I just absolutely love Strictly.
And this year we saw, the same-sex couple with John and Johannes. And in many of the Vox Pops they said if only they had seen this when they were growing up, and particularly Johannes coming from South Africa, which was, he said, incredibly difficult. So it's about role models, it's about people. There's a young woman in our community workers team, and she got married to her partner in October. And, it was all open and the families were there and it was all lovely. And I just had a little chat with her beforehand and said, I could not have done this at your age.
That's what I was going to say to you, Debbie. How difficult is it for you, or how joyful, I suppose, is it for you now to look at same-sex couples getting married? And I have many, many friends who are in same-sex relationships for over 30 years and much longer than many heterosexual marriages, and they're in them. And how joyful or sad, I suppose, in many respects, do you feel when you see people getting married now in same-sex marriage, and you think back to your own time 30 odd years ago when you had to hide your sexuality?
I'm just grateful and glad that we are where we are, but and I emphasize this, okay? You can't take your hand off the steering wheel. You can't take your hand off the gear lever. You have to ensure that equality continues and equality remains. Otherwise, we'll backslide, and it could all go in an instant. Let's not. I saw a very interesting film last night, Mr. Jones. It was about a journalist called Gareth Jones, who in 1933 went to Russia, and he went out to the Ukraine, and he saw the terrible starvation and famine that was happening, that was being hidden by Stalin. And it was a remarkable film. And it just reminded me that you have to, people have to speak the truth, and you have to keep moving forward, because everything could so easily backslide. So,
But this whole conversation from the very start, I suppose there has been a thread running through it, and I suppose it's equality, whether it's equality for gay rights, whether it's for anti-Semitism or abolishing anti-Semitism, or for the rights of Muslim communities and that. But how difficult is it? How much do you think that social media has contributed to, I suppose, the breakdown in people's ability to be able to speak as they see free speech, if you like? And I know along with free speech comes a very important thing of being respectful. It's one thing being able to speak freely, but if what you're going to say is going to persecute another person, then perhaps you should think before you speak. But how important do you think is free speech? What do you think the contribution of social media has made in that desire, I suppose, for free speech? And do you think it has helped or hindered minority groups?
I think free speech is absolutely crucial to a democracy. As much as I disagree vehemently with Boris Johnson, I would absolutely support his right to speak.
Like Voltaire.
Voltaire. I was thinking of Voltaire as I was saying it. But social media is like, it's like the Gremlins, that film from the 80s, or Pandora's box, back to Greek mythology. We've opened that box now without really understanding how we deal with it. What we're going to have to do, we are going to have to catch up through legislation where we are with social media. It's taking some time, and some things are in operation. I mean, there's a lot of good in social media. People engage in different groups. You can announce things. You can show people. A different side to you as well. But you
create a different person.
Yes,
you can almost create, because you can hide what you're afraid to show.
Yes,
and you can show the better part of yourself.
But the falsehoods, we talked earlier about anti-Semitism. I mean, there's hatred towards all minority and underrepresented groups, and that anonymity needs to be taken out of the game. I will put on Twitter or on Instagram, and people know who I am, and I will say things never to harm. I will retweet things that I disagree with about the government, but in a contextual way. But you have to stop this anonymity of people just saying and doing what they like. That's not acceptable. It's not what I would have, it's not how I taught my youngsters in the classroom. I taught people to be respectful. We were respectful of each other in that space. And in the wider school, in the wider responsibilities I took on. And how can we expect our children and young people to be respectful when they see this filth, this torrent of abuse? We have to sort it out as a society. And if laws are the way to do it, then let's be it. And these companies need to pay proper and fair taxes as well.
Absolutely. That is a bone of contention I have. I mean, for instance, Facebook, and if you're trying to contact Facebook regarding a complaint, you can't. There is no person in Ireland that you can ring up and you can say, this has happened, that has happened. Yet they're practically tax-free, if not tax-free in
Yes.
this country. Twitter the same. I mean, there's something like 7 billion owed by Twitter to Ireland, and the Irish government has refused to went to court to actually avoid Twitter paying the Irish government. And yet the Irish people are put in penury, if you like, and you have a big conglomerate like Twitter that Apple, I should say, not Twitter, Apple, and they owe billions to this country in taxes, and I can't understand that.
No.
They should pay their fair share of tax, and they should have an office that you can contact.
Yes. Well, we need to legislate for all that, and a Labour government in the UK would.
Well, maybe under Sir Keir Starmer, I should give him a title, I suppose.
Well, he earned it. He's earned. I mean, talk about titles, and he says call me Keir, I say call me Debbie, but those titles are there, they exist, and they've been given for a specific purpose. And I'm extremely honoured to be the first person
to ask you. That's what I was going to ask. As a Labour woman and a Welsh woman, how does the I suppose the honour system lie with you?
I'm extremely honoured to have been recognised for the work that I've done, and to be put forward to work in the House of Lords, because that's what I do. I'll be up there tomorrow morning. I'll be there all week, working hard on the police and crime bill and various other legislation that's coming through this week in order to make things better. And who better than someone who spent a lifetime in the classroom, a lifetime on the ground in local government, and an ordinary girl from the Rhondda. Why shouldn't I be there with those people from other walks of life? Because we've all got something to offer. And I think that I'm a really good example of someone who has something to offer to make life better in the House of Lords.
Well, I think my late grandmother, she was Bloodwin Mary Fisher, and I think she would be really proud that I'm got the opportunity of speaking with you today, a fellow, I suppose, like herself, a fellow Welsh woman who has done good, as they say. And as I said to you, we have many things in common, you and I, except that you've been far more successful than me in life.
Well, as I said, how can you measure success? It can be measured in a variety of forms. I just happen to have, Baroness as a title in front of my name. That's a measure of success, but other people are highly successful in all walks of life. And I'm hugely respectful of what anyone achieves.
I find it very awkward to use the title. If people use doctor, to me, I find, say Mary, because I even writing it down as some things, I know I've got to write it on some occasions, but I try as much as possible not to, and I don't know what it is about our psyche that we should be more like the Americans who.
Yes. Well, I'm getting more relaxed about it, because every day in the house, you're called Milady by the people who work there, and
I love that.
and I accept it, and I respect it, and I respect the distance that gives between us, and the formality, because for 34 years, kids called me Miss. Same thing.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Debbie, Lady Wilcox, Baroness Wilcox of Newport, thank you for being my guest today and for answering some, as you said, tricky questions, but you answered them, as you said to me there earlier on. I didn't get where I am from being a shrinking violet.
Oh, indeed, I didn't. Not in the world of Welsh Labour politics and Welsh local government. First woman to lead Newport, first woman to lead the WLGA. It wasn't an easy task, but I had many good people around me women and men, and I have great respect for all my colleagues and comrades, and thank them very much. And it's just part of the journey. So Mary, thank you for the interview. Thank you for the opportunity to do this today. It's been very interesting to hear from you, and I hope that it's a worthwhile podcast for you.
It was a joy, honestly, truly a joy talking to. Well, Shindera Lesh an Clár, that's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, Lacuna of Day, Bawalum Tugalertia, Conna Sonus Agus Bro, I wish you peace, happiness and love, Agus Gadeshiv Sloan, and Kimru Ambath.
Diolch yn fawr.
No star Kigid.
No star.
No star.